the Baen Free Radio Hour.
Baen Free Radio Hour listeners, welcome. I'm Dave Butler, and I'm here today with Larry Correia from Yard Moose Mountain. We're talking about the release of Graveyard of Demons, which is out now in hardcover and also ebook in all of your favorite ebook formats, DRM free when you buy those ebooks from Baen.com. As always, of course, the hardback is also DRM free. Larry Correia is the New York Times bestselling author, as you likely know, of 25 novels. There we go. That number's outdated. I don't know what the right number is, Larry. How many novels you got out?
Heart of the Mountain is number 29.
Okay, so Graveyard of Demons is like 27 or 28, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay. He's best known for his Monster Hunter International urban fantasy series, the Saga of the Forgotten Warrior epic fantasy series, the Grim Noir Chronicles alternate history trilogy, the Dead Six military thrillers, and the science fiction Gunrunner. He's also written over 60 pieces of shorter fiction, many of which are included in his Target-rich environment collections, and he has edited 3 anthologies. He lives in Yard Moose Mountain, Utah, with his wife, children, and fearsome Krasnovian waffle hound. Larry, welcome to the show.
Hey, glad to be here, Dave.
So let's look, here's my general view on this. Generally, I don't think it's worth worrying too much about spoilers, because then we find out we're dancing around stuff and not saying anything.
Okay.
I also like to talk as if someone might hear this who has not read the first books, and we might persuade him to go to book number 1. So I'd love it if you talk to us a bit about, let's maybe start with Ashok Vidal. He's I can tell you that the series closes on Ashok Vidal. I'm one of like 4 people on the planet that know that now. So I think it's fair to call him the main character or a main character. Who's Ashok Vidal? What? Tell us about him. Let's talk about his world and his story.
Yeah.
What is this epic fantasy series about?
Well, the main character of the series is Ashok, and most of the adventure is from his perspective. The best way I like to describe Ashok for people who aren't familiar with the series is think fantasy Judge Dredd, who transitions into fantasy George Washington. He is, when the series begins, he's an enforcer, or he's a protector of the law, which means he's basically this militant magical law enforcement agent. Basically has been imbued with super magical powers, and even among his order of very select warriors, he is special because he is in possession of one of the greatest magical items in this universe. He is extremely dangerous. He's very devoted to the law, and this is when the book starts. He's out there burning villages, right? This is a world that doesn't have religion. Religion has been banned for a very long time, but it's kind of been replaced by an all-consuming law. Giant bureaucracy runs everything, and Ashok is their knee breaker. He is their guy, and he is completely devoted to the law. He is a basically perfect servant of it. But as the series goes on, he discovers that there's a lot more to his reality than he thought. He discovers he's not really who he thinks he was. There's a lot of betrayal in here, and this is a guy who is forced to come to terms with that and learn what it means to be a person, an actual human being. And he throws in with people who are criminals, who are banned underneath the law. And this is a world with like really brutal caste systems, which Ashok has been an enforcer of forever. So and it's a really cool series. So 6 books from beginning to end, and I just finished the last one. And it's mostly Ashok's story, but through his eyes we see a lot of stuff. And there's 4 or 5 other supporting characters that we see a lot of stuff from their perspectives. And it's just the tale of this. It's the end of an age and the beginning of a new one amongst this in this world. It's the end of the age of law, and really the question is what's going to replace it, and in whose image is the next age going to be founded. And Ashok is one of the big players in this, and Man, I tell you, I've been working on this for 10 years. 10 years I've been working on this series, and I
Yep.
love it. It's probably the best thing I've ever written as far as quality.
Yeah.
It's deeper. It's a lot deeper. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love everything I write. I mean, you kind of have to as a writer. I love all my series. I love all my IPs, all my worlds. But this is the deepest one, and the stuff it gets into, it's heavy. It gets into a lot of heavy stuff, and it's pretty dark too. But also, I'm not a grimdark writer in that I believe in heroism, and I believe in basically honor and dignity and good versus evil. And so I can't go full grimdark, but it is a dark world. It's brutal. It's a brutal world. Like I said, we open up with the main character burning villages. Okay, he has done some bad stuff that he's got to atone for, and yeah, I man, Dave, I'm super proud of this one. And Graveyard is book 5, out pretty soon, and Heart of the Mountain is book 6, final book. Series is done, and that'll be out
Yep.
in January.
Yep. Which I just finished reading earlier today, in fact.
Oh yeah, you are
And
one of, like I said, one of like 3-4 people in the world.
yeah, a very small number.
Count me.
So there's you touched on a lot. Let's unpack some of it. So I like the comparison to Judge Dredd, who becomes fantasy George Washington. That's fantastic. So let's talk about Judge Dredd. So Judge Dredd is intense, super devoted to the enforcement of the law. And the Judge Dredd comics, there is humor, but it's not him. He's not witty. He's not he's not out there some Errol Flynn character performing combat maneuvers and then cracking jokes, right?
Like,
He's not
haha.
right.
No.
Surfs up, boom. No, he's intense.
Yeah, I've had people say that like they would, because all the characters are basically Indian, and so if this was to be made in a movie, like Bollywood should make a movie, and people are like, well, no, we couldn't because they always put dance numbers in, and Ashok don't dance.
It would be a super interesting challenge.
There is no
Yeah.
there is no mirth. Okay, so Ashok does have a sense of humor.
Yeah.
In over the course of 6 books, I think he might like make an amusing, to him at least, observation, maybe like 3-4 times.
Yeah.
And I think in 6 books there's maybe 10 times where somebody says something that makes him laugh.
Yeah. Yeah. But he's it seems like the sort of essential characteristic of his is devotion or commitment, or like what at one point in book 6 he says something like, I mean, it's almost like the Yul Brynner line, so let it be written, so let it be done. As I said it would be X, it's going to be X, right? He's that guy. We see him burning villages and straight down the line, enforcing the law. But then he becomes, over the course of the story, becomes devoted to other things, including ultimately sort of defending humanity, right? The final battle is humans versus demons. And also to his romantic relationship. It's intensely romantic love story. And he has other than the issue of the song and dance, it is a sort of a Bollywood kind of drama, intensity and drama.
Yeah, part of it was him learning how to be a human being, because he starts out and he's basically a construct of the law, right? And
in a literal way, right? Like he's a construct of the law, but there is like in his background, there is a little kind of Frankenstein happening.
yeah, because this guy was not just a regular person. He at first thinks he's a regular person with a regular upbringing, and it turns out that's all a lie. He's been built from the ground up for a purpose, and basically engineered to be the perfect servant of the law. He has no fear. Literally, he cannot experience fear, and his fear was. We'll find out why, but his fear was taken from him specifically so he would not live so long. They figured if he had no fear, he's going to die sooner. He's expendable. But it just turns out that just doesn't really matter for him. I mean, he's still aware of danger and he's calculating, but nothing fears. He has no fear. As it goes on, though, so for me to make him a person, he basically learns to love because of one woman, who he meets her at first and he hates her guts. Like, she symbolizes to him everything wrong with the world, right? And she does not like him either because he symbolizes to her everything wrong with her world, because she's a criminal. She's an outsider. Thera was thrown out of her caste. She's caste and status is everything in this world, right? And so she was a woman of importance at one point, and that was all stripped from her. That was all taken away from her unfairly. But she's a criminal now, and so she sees in Ashok all the cruelty of the law, and he sees in her just this vile lawbreaker in the worst way possible, because she's spreading illegal religion, which is like the worst thing ever. So I hooked these two up and put them in a situation where they can't kill each other. And over the course of several books, as Ashok describes it later, first he came to respect her, and then he came to love her. And so I put those, and actually that was probably the best love story I've ever written. And I no spoilers for the last book, but man, it's
Yeah, the way it ends is really intense
it's intense.
and
It is
deeply
intense.
romantic.
Yeah. Yeah, she's a great character. I love Thera, and so putting her with Ashok, they balance off each other, they riff off each other. They both learn and grow kind of in different ways, because Ashok is completely uncaring.
Yeah.
At the beginning. Thera pretends to be uncaring because she has to put on this like armor of hardness because her world is so hard. She's actually a very caring, motherly person.
Yeah.
She's got a big heart, but she can't. This is such a hard place that just makes you a victim,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so she's a survivor, and so
Yeah.
she does a lot of bad things because she has to, and so she just kind of is a hag to a lot of people. But
Yeah.
as the series goes on, she's forced into situations where she has to confront that, and Ashok has to confront that. And they basically learn from each other, which is frightening because it's two really messed up people, and the fate of mankind like lies in their hands.
Yeah. And they stay sort of in their own corner still, right? They stay different. She takes on and part of the overarching story is that there have religion's illegal. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. There are people, fanatics, right? They're always called fanatics who
Yeah,
worship.
it's always derogatory anytime
Right.
any law-abiding man refers to them.
Right, is wild-eyed fanatic. She ultimately takes on a sort of a prophet role, not sort of. She becomes the prophet
Against her will.
against her will. Ashok does not become a devotee of the gods. To the end, he's sort of, even as he's sort of talking to them, he's not really sure they're there, right?
Yeah. He's
So
he's forced to recognize that there are things afoot beyond his understanding,
yeah,
but he doesn't like it.
yeah,
At no point is he like a loyal servant. He's more like, get out of my way, you bastards.
right. Right. And yeah, and so they can be loyal to each other, and they can like find shared commonality in like humanity's fight against demons to survive, while we're retaining these sort of actually quite large differences. So it's a great love story, Larry. Well done.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil the last couple, but man, that was intense. Like,
Yeah,
that was emotional.
yeah, yeah.
I made
So
Jason Cordova cry.
yeah,
I got a text from Jason when he finished it, and he was like, "You bastard, you made me cry."
the final scenes with Thera, was that what made him
No,
cry?
it was the very last scene, actually.
Oh, the
The
very
very
last.
fine, very, very, very final scene, which I will not give away, but very
Yeah,
final scene. He just started to cry.
that's funny. Okay, so you reference him having a magic item. He gets this early on and has kind of an evolving relationship with it, but there's a collection of magical swords in this story. Tell us about, and they play roles all the way through.
Oh yeah.
Uh, yeah, tell us about
So
these swords.
So in the way magic works in this world, there's two forms of magic that can be harvested, and you basically have to have magical fuel to use magic. So there's
Mhm.
two sources of magic, and that's black steel, which we learn a lot about as the book goes on, and demons. You can harvest demons for the magic inside of them.
Mhm.
Demons are a renewable resource, but unfortunately, you have to kill a giant killer monster to
They're
get it.
costly.
Yeah, it's a costly resource because they will eat you. Basically, as the series goes on, you see that the ratio between man versus demon is about 50 warriors to one demon
Yeah.
is a trade. So yeah, so fifty dudes in armor with axes and spears can maybe take a demon,
Yeah.
and most of them will die. So it's a renewable resource. But black steel is an ancient thing. What there is what there is, but it is very refined, very extremely powerful.
Yeah.
Um, don't
Seems
want
to
to
have
give too much
will.
away as to the true nature of it, which is kind of slowly revealed as the books go on. But the ancients came up with this stuff is a material that can basically bend reality
Uh-huh.
um, at the fundamental quantum level.
Yeah.
Okay, at the smallest levels of matter, and that's hence you could do all sorts of stuff with black steel,
Yeah.
and it is powerful. Now,
Mhm.
so what they have today, because they've lost most of the ability to utilize this, what they have now is like a tiny fraction of what
Okay.
came before, as far as the knowledge available. And so, at some point in the past, about 1,000 years in the past, a guy who was basically a super soldier of the gods took this black steel and forged it into a bunch of weapons that could be used even by idiots. So you didn't need to be trained on, the ability to use all these different magical formats. Here is a weapon, and it is a weapon. It is in a format that you are familiar with, and that was a sword, because everybody knew how that worked. So he forged a bunch of these, and from materials he had left over, and distributed them and to the people who were basically the defenders of their people. Now, the way that worked is black steel being down to like that level of fineness, it cuts through damn near anything.
Mhm.
It obliterates stuff, and it's energetic in its destructive capabilities. But what makes it really, really dangerous is not just like you're swinging around a death beam. It's the fact that it stores memories and it stores instincts and knowledge of every single person that's ever used it,
Mhm.
is inside of it. So you could give this to a complete dork, and he is now the most dangerous person in the world.
Yeah.
Um, in his physical capabilities and his tactical capabilities are now off the charts.
Yeah.
Um, and so in that respect, so the swords are capable of so much more, but basically this is like the idiots this is like the idiot's guide to weapons of mass destruction. I can hand these out to basically a bunch of cavemen and say, "Good luck," and they will wreck face.
Yeah.
Um, Now we've moved on in time. There's only 12 when the series starts. There's only 12 of these left in the world.
And
But
basically one belongs to each sort of each one belongs to kind of a major clan or a kinship group kind of thing.
yeah, yeah. So in this series, so the way it works politically is it's been very family based and it's caste based, but within the caste are families. And so there used to be there was more division as there was more swords because if you had one of these in your family, that was a big deal. You had one dude who could fight an army by himself. I mean,
Mhm.
so logistically speaking, that was an incredible resource. But they have a code of honor. They are sentient and they have a plan. So they would direct the users towards the ultimate goal of that plan over the generations.
Yeah.
And as we see, there are times where they destroy themselves because the user is taking it off the plan.
Mhm.
Um, which the plan is mysterious to the people. So they around these weapons is kind of this mythology, this mystique
Mhm.
of like the swords have a code of honor and they test their users, and if you're not worthy, they will injure the hell out of you or kill you
Yeah.
if they don't think you're the right person to bear them. And they are super merciless and unforgiving because there's no such thing as a flesh wound with one of these.
Yeah.
I mean, it is like they muff you up. Um, and so the swords are kind of steering the
Mhm.
houses towards this, but over time they're breaking, and plus it is a it is a material that has a finite life as it's used, and so they give up the ghost as it goes too. But at this point, there's 12 of them left, and so basically a great house possesses each one of those. That's like their weapon. Like I said, there used to be hundreds of them, and there were other devices besides the swords, which we run into as the series goes on, with different responsibilities and capabilities. But they're all basically working towards the goal, which we get to in book 5 and 6. We get
Yeah.
to see why these things are here.
Yeah.
And it's actually really cool. So the main character has one called Angruvidal, and it is his only friend for all the parts of the book. And but yeah, so Ashok is not only a protector of the law, which means he's a highly trained, magically augmented warrior. He also is one of the 12 bearers, carrying the most powerful weapons in the world. And
Yeah.
so that's why he's so incredibly dangerous.
Yeah, this is not, as we were discussing before we turned the recording on, this is not progression fantasy. That at no point in the story do we see Ashok as zero. He starts out, there's massive changes in what he believes and how he sees himself and what he's loyal to. But he starts out as a Larry Correia badass with a magical sword.
Yeah, so like the thing my current project I'm doing, progression fantasy, so I'm going 0 to hero, right?
Yeah.
Ashok opens with, he's already a badass. Like he is, I mean, we get flashbacks to when he was a kid, but the series opens with him already being incredibly super friggin' deadly. And he just goes up from there, actually. Because he gets into some stuff that no man on this world has ever done before. And he because he's the only person in 1,000 years capable of doing the stuff that he does.
Yeah.
So by the end of the book, I mean, he is a weapon of mass destruction by himself. I mean, he is a legend. He, I mean, Dave knows where I went with this. But yeah, this kind of guy, they're building statues to, hundreds of years later.
Yeah, there's the 2 lines at the in the final battle, right? This is late in the series. It goes something like 4 demons charged Ashok, 4 demons fell, or something like that. So yeah, he's fierce. So it's about his change and how he sees the law and his society. By the end, there's systematic upheavals, right? I mean, you talk about a caste system. So there's different tribal groups and kingdoms, but you also have people who are merchants and people who are warriors, and those are not the same thing, and people who are workers and people who are casteless, who ultimately play sort of an interesting prophesied kind of role. So why? I mean, this is obviously there's some India inspiration here, right? What made you pick India? That's interesting. What drew you to this stuff?
That's the fun one. So, okay, so this was one that was kind of unexpected. So this is kind of one of those accidental writer things.
Mm-hmm.
So how this series came about was I was writing Monster Hunter Alpha a long time ago, and I always write to a musical soundtrack, and it was so I was writing to the I always buy every Hans Zimmer album, right? And I was listening to the soundtrack for Inception, and there's a song called "Waiting for a Train." I had not even seen the movie, all right? So I hadn't seen Inception yet when I was listening to this. I didn't watch it till way later, and so I'm listening to this song, and it just started painting a scene in my head because it like starts this real slow build up to this massive crescendo, right? And I'm listening to it, and as I was writing Monster Hunter Alpha, I had my headphones in, and I stopped and I thought, wow, this scene is really putting a scene in my mind. So writer brain kicked in, and it was so intense. I stopped working on Alpha, and I just stopped, and I was like, I wrote a short story based on the feeling of that scene. And that scene was in book 1, where Ashok returns to Vidal, and he goes to the dinner party. It's the dinner party knife fight scene was what this was. And so I wrote this scene and just made it up on the spot that day. And I started thinking about it. I was like, okay, I mean, there was a lot of stuff that I had no idea what was going on, but it had to have caste systems. it had to have caste system. It had to have untouchables. It had to have a high caste, it had to have a warrior caste, and it had to have untouchables. And so when I wrote that, I was like, okay, you know what? Because at this point, all the characters are blank in my mind. And I was like, all right, this has to take place in a world in a caste system. And where do we have a real life example with a lot of historical stuff to draw from was India. And so at that point, so later on, when I actually went to write a book based on this idea that I just loved, it had to be a caste system world. So I thought, you know what? I might as well make it Indian. I might as well draw upon that culture and that history as the fundamental building blocks to do a fantasy world on. Which wasn't really a conscious decision because a lot of people were like, "Oh, there's too much Western fantasy. There's too much, too many Vikings."
You weren't trying to represent your Indian ancestors in yeah.
My ancestors invaded India, Dave.
The Portuguese invaded a lot of places, Larry.
Yeah, actually, very specifically, Gaspar Correia sailed with Vasco da Gama to Goa.
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
Yeah, so quite literally, I'm like, so when that gets out, the people who are going to like complain about colonizer, yeah, that's pretty much what my people did.
That's funny.
No, so that's how it wound up being Indian influence.
Yeah.
But that actually was a lot of fun because that opened up a lot of possibilities of stuff I could draw upon, like culture and history. But I went off my own direction. That's the beautiful part of it being a fantasy world, is I could use that as a springboard. But then anything I get wrong, I was like, "What's a fantasy world?"
Right. Yeah, like, hey, look, I'm trying, right? And it's fiction anyway. But you borrow a lot of names, Upagraha and Jangdir, a lot of character and place and kind of deity names are either Indian or sort of clearly inspired.
Yeah, everything got drawn from basically Southeast Asia, India, over to basically Thailand.
Interesting.
Would be where everything got drawn from there.
Yeah. Have you heard from any readers in the region? Have you heard, because you've got this
Yeah.
is a volume.
It's actually the reception every time I've talked to somebody, because actually I know that years ago I talked to the Simon and Schuster rep, and they said that it was so Son of Blacksword actually did really good in the English language fiction market in India, and people loved it. And everybody I've talked to from there has thought it was great. I haven't had anybody like, "Wow, you really screwed this up or really got this wrong." Everybody was like, "Wow, no, this is pretty cool." And plus, I had one guy, an Indian fella, I was talking to a little while ago, and he loved it because he's like, it's not very often in Western literature that Indian men get portrayed as badasses.
Oh, that's an interesting point. That is interesting. Yeah, the sort of stock cliches we tend to see, they're not necessarily denigrated, right? But it's like the Indian doctor or the Indian shopkeeper. And I think of those as like positive, but yes, but that's true. It's not like the hard-nosed roundhouse kicking cop or whatever.
Yeah. And so there was definitely, I mean, but if you watch Indian movies, there is a lot of that. But like in the Western world, we just don't see much of that. And but this guy was like, "Dude, these guys are badasses."
Yeah. That's funny.
Well, I mean, I also have a lot of characters who come from the different castes and the different backgrounds and the worker caste, and I have scholars and whatnot, and people who aren't built for war, but several of the main characters, they're built for war. Okay, that's what they do. That's their job, and they are written accordingly.
And they're written accordingly. With some really exciting combat scenes in every book.
And now we bring you our audiobook serialization of Tinker by Win Spencer. Inventor girl genius Tinker lives in a near-future Pittsburgh, which now exists mostly in the land of the elves. She runs her salvage business, pays her taxes, and tries to keep the local ambient level of magic down with gadgets of her own design. When a pack of wargs chase an elven noble into her scrapyard, life as she knows it takes a serious detour. Tinker finds herself taking on the Elven Court, the NSA, the Elven Interdimensional Agency, technology smugglers, and a college-minded xenobiologist as she tries to stay focused on what's really important, her first date. Armed with an intelligence the size of a planet, steel-toed boots, and a junkyard dog attitude, Tinker is ready to kick butt to get her first kiss.
She was growing sure that Riki had told her one truth. A gate had only recently opened from Earth to Onihida. Too many little things were pointing at it. The throwaway comments about Earth-born Oni, the carpenter's obvious awkwardness with the most basic of power tools, the famine-obsessed cook, the brown rice which turned out to be a luxury item not served to the carpenters, to their dismay. The list grew the entire morning. When she believed she was on Onihida, she hadn't paid attention. That she was no longer on Elfhome had been proof enough for her. Now she couldn't stop wondering about it. She had delegated building the framework to Riki so she could concentrate on limiting the veil effect and making it the primary function of the new gate. Her biggest fear was she'd only swap the dimensional side effect with the jump capabilities of the gate and accidentally send Pittsburgh to Alpha Centauri. An hour of running models reassured her that if she did, it would be a very small chunk, most likely only the Oni compound itself. Small loss there. Her mind, however, kept trotting back to the Oni store to Onihida. Riki had said it was an inconvenient spot. Obviously, it was located outside of the U.S., or the Chinese visas wouldn't be needed. Certainly, if the two doors were on opposite sides of the planet, it could be called inconvenient. She jerked to a halt. Luckily, only Pony noticed. "What is it?" "I think I know where their stupid door is," she murmured, wheeling her chair away from the drafting table to her desktop screen and calling up a world map. "I just can't believe no one's noticed before now." Like all the information on the gate, she had the location where the gate was in geosynchronous orbit over the Earth's equator. She found the point and zoomed in. It's so simple. Pittsburgh is on Elfhome because the gate projects the veil effect down through the Earth, where the magnetic core bends it, kind of like a prism bends light, thus hitting Pittsburgh on the other side of the planet. Only partially under the gate was a tiny island surrounded by ocean. She laughed. Of all the dumb luck, a few more feet and their gate would have been totally in open water. Pony peered at the island for several minutes before saying, "I don't understand. How can this open to Onihida and this," he pointed to the other side of the world, "open to Elfhome?" "That's the simple part. The Earth core is acting as a lens." "Pardon?" She closed the incriminating map and opened a scratch file. "Look, here's Earth with the core in the center. This side is the China Sea, and the other side, up here, is Pittsburgh. The gate orbits over the sea. The veil effect comes down a cylindrical shape, but the core acts like a lens. That means the veil is flipped." Seeing Pony's blank look, "You see things because light comes down and reflects off it. So if you have a tree, the light comes from the sun, hits the trees, and reflects to your eye." He nodded. "Yes, I know this." "But if you hold a glass lens up between you and the tree, the light is bent by the lens. The top of the tree is bent to the bottom, and the bottom is bent to the top, so the image is flipped." Pony pointed to the tree. "Onihida," and tapped the upside-down image. "Elfhome." "Yes, that's simple. For 20 years, every shutdown and startup, that tropical island has been going to Onihida and back, and no one has noticed." "Or noticed, and the Oni killed them." "Yes, that too." Pony pointed then to the gate in orbit. "Whatever you do, build the Oni a gate or not, means little while that exists. That is the true prison door hanging open." The carpenters tried to quit after dinner, but she tracked Riki down in the ocean of sawdust with shoals of massive timbers and littered with the flotsam of cut ends. "Tell them that they can't leave," she said. "They've been working for like 10 hours. "They can work until they drop," Tinker growled. "Tell them to get back to work." "They're tired." "I don't care. If I'm going to meet TomTom's deadline, then everyone is going to have to work until they drop." "Be reasonable." "Your people started this. I'm just going to finish it. Tell them to go back to work or I'll take a crowbar to them." Riki winced. Okay. I'll get them back to work. Only Tom-Tom's appearance at midnight kept the carpenters from revolting. The carpenters would jerk to a stop, bow low, and get waved back to work, which they did with stunning enthusiasm. No slackers here. Tinker shut files on her desktop as he closed in on her office. It looks nearly complete. Tom-Tom motioned to the massive circle of wood taking form. The framework is getting there, Tinker said. It's still a long way to go on this gate. Once we finish here, the carpenters can start work on the second gate. The frame itself will be identical, so the crew will need less guidance. I need Riki here with me. Oh, no. Tom-Tom cocked his head. Second gate? Tinker picked up evidence A. Well, you've got enough material here for 2 gates, maybe 3. I just assumed that you were building more than one, since the gate size is limited by the roof. A second gate, Tom-Tom said slowly. I haven't had a chance to look over the area. Tinker indicated the buildings around them. I recommend you keep the 2 gates as far apart as possible. There might be possible interference between the 2. Besides, it would prevent bottleneck. Bottleneck? Traffic jams. Tinker turned to Riki as he arrived from the other side of the warehouse. Riki, can you explain bottleneck to him? Riki looked puzzled, but launched into Oni, pushing his hands together to illustrate 2 forces colliding together. Tom-Tom's reply made Riki jerk around to stare at her. A second gate? Oh, she said. Riki looked at her in blank confusion. The framework for a second gate might go faster. She ignored Riki to focus on Tom-Tom, but the rest of it will take the same amount of time, and I won't be able to start it until after this one is done. The schematics will need to be tailored to the location and orientation and various other deciding factors. Riki cannot do them? Tom-Tom said. Tinker shook her head. No more than he can do this one. Tom-Tom turned to Riki for verification. Riki looked at her strangely. No, I can't. I'm still not grasping how the gate works. I have no clue what the next step will even be. Tom-Tom accepted the truth. Fine, we will have a second gate on the other side of the compound. The carpenter foreman came up to grovel and beg. Tom-Tom laughed, showing sharp cat teeth. As eager as you are, I cannot have you slave-driving my people. It would reflect poorly on me. Everyone quits for the night, even you.
That was another installment in Win Spencer's Tinker, and that's it for the podcast. Thanks as always to Audible.com and podcast theme composer Ruth Judkowitz, and good night Tony Daniel wherever you are. This is David F. Shirod coming to you from a soundproof bunker somewhere deep in the heart of Texas. Join us here next week in the hammering heart of science fiction and fantasy, and keep reaching for the stars.